This is the European edition of Breaking Banks, the world's #1 FinTech podcast and radio show. We bring you the European unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving FinTech scene today. A truly localized podcast with both English and local language content, with some of the world's most well-known hosts and influencers in the FinTech sector globally. Join us every week as we explore what makes the European Union a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing FinTech plays in the world today. Okay, let's roll.
Hey guys, welcome back to Breaking Banks Europe. My name is Matteo Rizzi, the executive producer of the show. And this is episode 103, a little over 2 years of Breaking Banks Europe. As you know, one of the formats that we have is focused on a particular ecosystem. And now we want to come back to Portugal for two reasons. One, because it's been a while that we haven't took sort of news from the ecosystem, but also because this is a special sort of WebSummit crypto 2 weeks recap from Lisbon, where, you know, a good part of the FTS team and the Breaking Banks team is based. And I'm here with Antonio Diaz Martins, one of the executive directors of Startup Portugal. Antonio, welcome to Breaking Banks Europe.
Thank you, Matteo. It's a pleasure.
So, Antonio, why don't you, as usual, give us a little bit of background? I sort of spied you in LinkedIn a little bit because we never had the pressure to meet in person. And by the way, you know, I was a good friend of João Vasconcelos. You know, back then, you know, it was a good friend, and I think it's, you know, always good to sort of reminding, you know, to everyone how like a great human he was. So I know a little bit of the startup Lisbon sort of pattern and ecosystem. And I saw you have a very particular background. So you're not coming from the startup world, right? I was curious.
Hey, actually, I've been connecting with startups all my life because I started being a consultant for Accenture, then moved to start up a private equity fund that also looked at new businesses, and then went on in banking. And afterwards, I was a manager, general manager of a family office, a Portuguese big family office for the last 11 years, which also invested in startups. So the startups ecosystem always was a part of my professional life, and it is with great satisfaction that I, since 1.5 months, have joined Startup Portugal team to follow up the work done by the previous direction, the previous board of directors. We are now entering a new cycle for Startup Portugal. I think it was founded in 2016 by João Vasconcelos, as I told. He left a great legacy in what relates to startup world and entrepreneurship community in Portugal. And the first years were highly dedicated to put startups and entrepreneurship on the first priority of the economy in Portugal. And I think that was made with success. The coming of WebSummit to Lisbon was also a part of this work. And we are now entering a phase where we, Startup Portugal, want to develop and want to be maybe a scale-up and to have additional resources and do new projects with new capacity based on the good work that has already been made until now.
It's great because you can give both a sort of the perspective on how the startup ecosystem has evolved, but also how the capital, you know, dedicated to startup has evolved. Because I remember I moved to Portugal officially in 2016, 17. And back then, the vertical, certainly in fintech, it was not like any sort of VC dedicated to fintech to start with. Banks were, a little bit looking at, what to do. Of course, as you said, the fact that the startup culture was pushed very, very hard. I believe that, as thanks to the Fidzai, if you want to, of the planet, the spotlight was on. But how do you think that the investment side has evolved, and how would you picture the situation right now?
Well, I think we are in good shape because even with the pandemic, investment in startups never been so high in Portugal as now. We just reached a goal of $1 billion United States dollars of investment year to date, 2021, in startups in Portugal, which is more or less the double than what it was made last year. And really, I think startups are becoming to be much more attractive to investors than previously. I think traditionally, traditional investors and funds were a little bit afraid of the startup world, and they were a little bit defensive. And one of the missions of Startup Portugal is to get them closer to this world and not being afraid of it. And I think we have a role there, but a lot of has already been made, and the results of higher investment in startups and entrepreneurship in the last years is really a proof of that. We have been connecting with the startup world permanently. As you know, we are a part of the WebSummit organization in what relates to taking Portuguese startup there and supporting the participation of startups in WebSummit. And once again this year, with a program that we developed, Road to WebSummit, we have supported 100 Portuguese startups to be present at the WebSummit. And this was really a success because not only because of the huge participation of the startups, but because we are seeing that unlike the previous years and the beginning years since 2016, we are seeing startups from all over the country, not only Porto and Lisbon and Coimbra and Braga are participating. So we are seeing startups for 21 regions of the country, which is a lot, being a small country. We are seeing startups from several areas of businesses, 26 areas of businesses represented in these 100 startups. So that's very significant. And we are seeing much more women as founders of these startups. So by this sample of startups that we see that we are supporting, we can see a little bit of the evolution of the ecosystem in Portugal. Additionally, we have a network of 160 incubators and accelerators all over the country that we coordinate and we manage here at Startup Portugal. And the feedback and the inputs that we have from that network is really enthusiastic about the interest that different regions of the country have been requested and have been spotted by external investors and external companies to move their resources to Portugal. And that is really good news that contradicts a little bit this terrible 1.5 year that we have been passing with the pandemic, because maybe the location and the regional location is not such a big as a problem as in the previous days before pandemics, and really external investors and external corps are really looking to the whole country and not only to Lisbon or Porto and Braga and Coimbra. So I think that's a quick picture of the startup ecosystem that we have been seeing in the last year or two developing, and I think it's great news because the evolution is really on the positive side.
Antonio, do you think as well that sort of the mentality of the entrepreneurs is evolving? And I'm asking because I often sort of compare the Portugal startup scene with Israel, okay? Which it's for two very different reasons, of course, because Israel is more focused on certain verticals. But the reason why I make this parallel is that usually, no startup is interesting, capital-wise in terms of investment if they would only focus on a Portuguese market, right? By definition, because Portugal is a small market. So is it that the fact that this evolution is done also by a sort of a switch of mentality where, indeed entrepreneurs, they understand more and more that, it is actually an opportunity to have quick access to resources, being a place where, developers want to actually come and move, where actually resources are extremely bright in terms of, and yet at the more affordable cost that in the rest of Europe, because we have to, say the things as they are. So how about that mentality switch? And do you think that both investor and entrepreneurs are sort of come to terms with that, with the fact that even if these are other small ecosystem, really, you can perform here investment without borders?
Yeah, you're totally right. I think there are two main words about startups that we have to take into account, which is innovation. It's absolutely paramount, the importance of innovation. And I think the second word is talent. And in those two fields, I think the mentality and the presence and the importance of Portugal has been rising absolutely in an unquestionable way in the last years. We saw a big movement of talent leaving the country 5 years ago, 6 years ago, to corporations and to outside and to exterior markets. And I think the question has arisen as in these times with the remote work and with the possibilities of recruiting all over the world the best talent wherever it is. I think moving back to Portugal and coming back to Portugal is a really great option. And we see, because Portuguese talent that were fixed abroad started to see foreign talent wanting to come to Portugal to develop its activity in this country. So why not the Portuguese people coming back again and start doing that in their own country where they speak their language? So I think it's a movement that we have seen is the coming back of Portuguese talent, of Portuguese business, of Portuguese founders that are wanting to come back, and a bigger interest in foreign companies to recruit and to select talent that lives and that works through and in Portugal. And I think that is because we really have the skills, we have magnificent conditions, weather, culture, sun, beaches. I think we have really excellent conditions to attract people. And in what relates to talent, we have another thing that you mentioned, and it is really a critical point. It's because I think we are born with a mentality of looking to the whole world as the necessary market of expansion from day one when designing a new business, because nobody can start up a business in Portugal just dedicating a scalable business, let's say, just dedicating their efforts only to the Portuguese market, because it's not possible, because we don't have enough size of market to make a business scalable. So from the inception, from the beginning, a new idea has to be directed to international markets. So we have that flexibility, we have that mindset, and I think that is really appreciated by all companies around the world when they want to come and attract the Portuguese talent. We also speak very easily foreign languages. I think we are the 7th most proficient English country in the world, because from youngsters we really give English education to our children, and we are very close to United States geographically and historically, and also to the United Kingdom, and doing businesses and obviously doing transactions and connecting with them. And so those are truly differentiating points and advantages that beneficiate us when comparing to similar conditions in other countries. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And actually, before maybe diving a little bit into more like the fintech and the financial services space, when you were mentioning about the fact that solutions are by default designed to go abroad, I think that there is something else that, in my opinion, I've seen developing a lot, which is this identity of Lusophone countries. So like Cabo Verde coming to WebSummit and having a startup cluster, and Brazil, same thing. I saw the plane, or like going. I spoke at the Angolan Digital Summit, and fintech was a huge focus. Mozambique is doing a fintech revolution, but a fintech regulation, and a lot of sort of Portuguese entrepreneurs are actually there because they want to there is this sort of Portuguese speaking ecosystem is becoming a thing. This is what this is what I perceive, and I believe it would be smart to actually invest even more especially because if you bring Brazil into the picture as well, you have almost an untapped and an innovation early stage ecosystem that it would be smart to invest on, don't you think?
Totally. One of the efforts this year in Startup Portugal organization of its presence in the WebSummit was really to connect with Portuguese-speaking countries, namely with Brazil. We had more than 200 startups coming from Brazil that connected with Portuguese startups by our intervention, by our promotion, and I think there's a lot to do in that field. I have been talking with Brazilian government representatives. They are really eager and really enthusiastic of learning things with us and from our experience, because they are a huge country, a huge market, and maybe some things that we have here in a smaller scale, like the incubators network, like Startup Portugal being an independent association, very close to the government, but also very connected with the entrepreneur ecosystem. They, in a much wider and bigger country, have more difficulty and in implementing from zero. So they want really to learn from us. And I think they are very enthusiastic. Ultimately, in the last years, there's a big movement of Brazilians coming to Portugal to develop their own businesses. And I think they are enthusiastic about this relationship with Europe via Portugal, because that is the way we are being seen by all the other African and American countries that speak Portuguese as a gateway of entering European market. And I think we can be very useful in that. And it's an advantage, and it's a competitive, let's say, advantages that we have when comparing with other countries. I think also within Europe, we have a lot of things to do. And recently, the government launched an initiative, which is Europe Startup Nation Alliance, which will be the head office will be in Lisbon near WebSummit. It was launched this year, and it will be participated by 26 EU countries, and each country will designate their own representatives and their own startup associations locally. And Startup Portugal is going to have a role and a big contribution also in that field. So I think we have, for one side, to do our homework in Europe, to make Europe a really addressable market to each new business, to each entrepreneur, and to be easily reached when somebody starts up a business. Because unlike America, like Brazil, when you start up a business in one country in Europe, sometimes it's difficult to scale up and to develop to other European countries. And we don't want that to happen, because we want that the 450 million market that we have in Europe can be easily addressable and available to each startup created in Europe, as the United States market is available for any startup in the United States, and as the Brazilian market is available for any new startup venture in Brazil. So I think we have to do our homework in Europe, and we are trying to do that. And Portugal had a big role in the European Union to start up this alliance that is going to facilitate and to do this whole unique European market more reachable and more available to each new venture in European countries. And we have to do also the bridge to other countries that want to come to Europe and that speak our language. And the Portuguese-spoken countries, the Portuguese-speaking countries are obviously a natural point of contact to us. And with Brazil and with African countries, we are already doing that.
And it's actually a good transition for the last thing I want us to focus on in this conversation, which is a specific sort of vertical on financial services. Okay, because in Portugal, neobanks are sort of the foreign neobanks coming in. Here there is plenty of Revolut and number 26 clients, but Portugal, in my humble opinion, as a sort of a fintech guy with the vision of a little bit everywhere else, it was and it is pretty much dominated by banks, the financial services innovation, until the past 2 or 3 years. And Portugal is actually extremely advanced in terms of ubiquitous payments. The MBWay sort of aliases type of payments is to me is a poster child, to including everyone in the system. But if we take actually the fintech ecosystem that expands indeed into Lusophone Africa, for example, you figure that there is no neobanks or very little sort of fintech-friendly regulation in other Portuguese-speaking countries. And I wonder, what are the opportunities here, right? Because, we all know that, the lending space, there are a couple of Portuguese companies that are leader in this, but they are maybe less funded by international VCs. They are doing really well, but everyone knows the non-Portuguese lending companies. Or, for example, here is you have a lot of giant startups that are outsourcing and start sort of their IT platform here, for the very good reason that we mentioned earlier. I am still missing, what FinTech is doing for real here in Portugal. It's I see the FinTech house. I see good signs. But that's my personal opinion so far. There is a lot to do, but that may be my perception.
No, I think you're right. I think it's an area, traditionally, the financial system in Portugal was during a lot of years very conservative. We had one thing that differentiates us from the international markets, which was an interbanking company association that is called SIBS, that is transversal to all the system, and I think that it was a good thing to happen because it made focus on developing new technology and new software and new possibilities that would be participated and directed to all banks working in Portugal. But I think some additionally to that, some specific projects are being developed that can make this area more dynamic in the future. We have some Portuguese founded companies that then went abroad and then to the States, like Encourage, that works in that area, namely in cryptocurrencies. We have also some new approaches to lending with small Portuguese FinTech companies like Reis, that also reinvented the way to direct lending to small companies that didn't have the interest and from traditional banks because of their supposed higher risk of credit. And it has been proven that in case, for instance, of Reis, the delinquency rate is really low when you are able to manage and to look through things and to analyze corporates and corporate risk in a very complete and professional way. They have a delinquency rate of only about 1.5%, which is nothing. And so I think we are doing something, but there is a lot of work yet still to do ahead. And it's an area of high potential development in the future. We can also see the examples of what is happening in Brazil, which are very. They had to do in the FinTech world and in the financial world. They had to develop a lot more quicker than us in Portugal, because historically they struggled a lot in this area and they had to improve their capabilities in this area much quicker than we. And so I think it's one of the areas where we can still develop and still increase the number of projects and the number of new ventures. But I think traditional banks are really having somehow a difficult time because their model and their legacy and the historical issues sometimes don't let them be so aggressive and so flexible and so innovative in their offers. So we have to let that to startups and to entrepreneurships in that area to lead the way ahead. So I think it's an area of future growth that we are going to see in the next years, really being developed here in Portugal.
Which might be the reason why the whole crypto and blockchain ecosystem is so flourishing here, right? Because it is almost if the most radical innovation in financial services sort of got a fertile ground here in Portugal. I was actually trying to remember the name of Marco Nigris. He's also working on a startup that does lending through crowdfunding through blockchain. The name escaped me of the startup, but because you see all this blockchain ecosystem in the country, and we sort of witnessed the fact that in the past 2 weeks, right now, sort of overlapping the WebSummit and the whole week later, there were probably a dozen of crypto events, and if you go to LC Factory, you see all these crypto guys walking and going to the Solana event or to the Binance one, and it was actually super bustling. Is that because what's motivating that? Is that both a sort of crypto friendly ecosystem? Is how many people I talk to, how many crypto holders, they say, I just want to move here because this is it, because as the mother of digital nomad community, Portugal seems just to be a natural gathering from them. But what else is there?
Yeah, you're right. I think we still are struggling a little bit with regulation issues, and it's really a challenge for those types of projects to start up and to be retained in Portugal. So we see a lot of initiatives starting in Portugal and growing abroad, where the regulation issues and this type of barriers are more flexible and are more developed. So I think that is something where we have to work in Portugal to improve the environment and the conditions to develop that sector and that area. But yeah, I think we have conditions in terms of knowledge, in terms of skills, in terms of talent. Already some specific projects that already shown us that either in tech regulation, cybersecurity, alternative financing, in payments and money transfers, lending, credit. I think a lot of areas that you have specific Portuguese initiatives that show that something is really being done. But I think there's a lot to go ahead and a lot to be done in the future. And I think in that area, European Union regulation, Portuguese regulation, and really has to step ahead and has to facilitate the conditions to start up this type of sector and businesses.
Antonio, our time is up. Thank you very much for being with us. And we are all watching closely the evolution of the ecosystem because you're just here. Estoril, like only 20 kilometers from Lisbon, but I'm looking forward for the result of the great work that you and the team are actually going ahead. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Matteo, very much. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. It's a wrap.
FinTech Stage builds innovation ecosystems. We engage incumbents, investors, entrepreneurs, technology partners, and regulators to build trusted and connected FinTech tribes around the world. We firmly believe that innovation in financial services will improve people's lives. Through our immersive programs, we connect global industry experts with local financial services communities to explore, challenge, and solve important issues related to FinTech, RegTech, InsurTech, artificial intelligence, identity, and financial inclusion. The good news is that we have done it before. InnoTribe was the first and largest FinTech movement worldwide, and our founders were amongst its orchestrators. We build programs with a wise combination of formats, partnerships, and content. It is experience-based, tailor-made, and proven to deliver results. Visit us at fintechstage.com or feel free to send an email to operations@fintechstage.com for more information.
Hey guys, welcome back to Breaking Banks Europe, episode 103, WebSummit episode focusing back on Portugal. I'm here with my friend and neighbor, almost, Pedro Vieira. We are both physically living in Portugal, but probably have one of the most international background that you might imagine. Pedro, really welcome to Breaking Banks Europe, my friend.
Thank you, Matteo. Thank you for having me.
So why don't you give us a little bit of your own background? But, investor sort of cuts it, right? But gives a bit more of color.
Sure. I'm indeed an investor, but I had many lives before that. So I'm Portuguese born, but then matured in the Bay Area. Spent 15 years in Silicon Valley as a grad student, and then as an entrepreneur, founded a company in the digital health space, helping people buy healthier, safer products. Terrific experience, backed by 2 top VCs, learned a lot. And we exited that company in 2012. And since then have been helping founders in some way, shape, or form. So initially, or right after that exit with Good Guide, was the name of the company, we set up a nonprofit called west2west.org that bridges between Portugal and Silicon Valley, helping entrepreneurs, Portuguese entrepreneurs and businessmen and women to go to Silicon Valley and learn about what's happening there, and then try and connect them with funding sources and whatnot. After that, came back to Portugal again after those 15 years and joined 500 startups to help them with all their capacity building initiatives in Europe and Africa. And then about a year and a half ago, joined Shilling.vc, which is an early stage investment team in Portugal. We launched our first institutional funds very recently. It's going to be a 45 million investment fund for pre-seed and seed tickets. We invest in a sector agnostic way, and we invest from Lisbon to the world. That's a long introduction.
Great. No, it is actually needed, and it's an amazing segue for actually the first thing that I want to talk about. So we were talking with Antonio of the fact that VC money seems to definitely have hit Portugal, right? We passed the $1 billion investment, but I'm curious to understand what are the gaps, because clearly you're focusing on seed and early stage. I assume that, is the seed and early stage with European measure, because we see like a 20 million seed in the US. I don't think we're that crazy here, but give us a little bit of the picture of how covered or not covered are the different stages. And if we can focus on FinTech a little bit, even better.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. So in terms of quantity, I can tell you from experience, having launched Shilling Founders Fund and actively deploying capital in the last 6 months or so in Portugal, that the quantity of the deal flow is much higher than we actually had initially forecasted. To give you a feeling, I think in 2019, 2020, maybe the team was looking at 200 deals, 300 deals a year. And now we're doing that amount on a quarterly basis. Obviously, we're also looking a little bit more outside Portugal than before, but still, there is a clear upswing in the number of deals. In terms of quality, also very interesting what we're seeing, because Portugal, and maybe this connects to some of the other things we'll talk later, is becoming really, really international. And so we are starting to see many more multi-times entrepreneurs. I don't like to call them serial entrepreneurs, but people who've built companies before and now are building another one. And they decided that Portugal is the place to do that. And so that is adding, I think, quality to the deal flow. Not that there's no Portuguese funds or Portuguese founders of quality. There are, for sure. I'm just saying that now you have diversity and you have quality in what we're seeing. And are they expensive or not? To your point on valuations. Yes, certainly there's still a gap between Europe and Southern Europe and Silicon Valley, for sure. But I can tell you the gap is closing really quickly. because the capital has always been global, but now more so than ever. The pandemic definitely changed things. The Brexit definitely changed things in Europe. And good founders now are setting up shop wherever they want, but the pools of capital are available for them regardless of where the capital is. And so a good founder in Lisbon or Porto these days can actually go raise easily from Berlin or London or San Francisco investors. And the valuation is going to be set by those markets. And so the Portuguese investors or whoever is like outside these three hubs that I talked about will have to play along those rules or add some extra value to justify a lower valuation, which is indeed what we try to do with Shilling.
I understand that this sort of uniformity, or ubiquity of opportunity in terms of finding investment. If we had the sort of the same conversation with some VC in Italy, and they were saying that Italian ecosystem is not sort of very dissimilar from the Portuguese one for a lot of reasons, and they were saying that typically they were lacking 10 to 20 million tickets from Italian investors, that they know the market, they can relate, that they have, local ties with potential partners. Is that the same case here? I would assume so, right?
Yes, it's true. So if there is a segment a segment or a stage that still lacks enough capital in Portugal, might be, the Series B and onwards. This is, but to my point of global investment these days, it's not as big of a problem anymore. I think that it is easier for a company in Southern Europe to go raise a Series B from investors in other European hubs or San Francisco or New York, as long as the metrics are there. But to actually have funds in Portugal do Series Bs and Cs, we have some, but not that many, indeed.
I get it. And, talking about the opportunities here, and the number of deals, if WebSummit, it was over like a week ago, but before WebSummit and the week after WebSummit, Lisbon specifically, I haven't, the other big cities, but they were actually super crowded with this sort of the crypto, right? Many of the different tokens and infrastructure had their event here. And, is this like a startup ecosystem you're familiar with? Why do you think is this? Don't forget that most of our auditors, they are not super familiar, right, with all this like ecosystem peculiarities. What is it? Is that like a fiscal? Is that technology? Is like the surf and the waves? What is it?
Well, I think it's all of the above. Like it's the perfect recipe. You need several ingredients for these things to happen. People always talk about Silicon Valley and how people could go about and replicate the model. And at the end of the day, there's always one common thread on these approaches to replicate Silicon Valley, which is it's all about the people who want to live in a consolidated area, right? In a small region. And they want to do so because they want to interact with other like-minded people and they like that region, right? And I think Lisbon is proving that theory right. Lisbon and Porto and Portugal in general, because the quality of life is terrific. There is a set of public incentives for people to move in, fiscal, obviously, but also in the crypto example you gave, it's that is the reason, right? So no taxes on crypto right now in Portugal. Let's hope it stays that way for a while for most of the investors. That's good, right? Or for all of the investors, that's good. But so there's fiscal incentives. Then there's incentives on creating the company. I just had an American friend who is considering relocating to Portugal, call me super excited. It took him like less than 30 minutes to get his fiscal ID and get set up in the country. So there's a lot of public support and governmental support for this. Quality of life, safety, very good place for families. And with the pandemic, more and more people saw Portugal as the safe haven. I mean, we are the number one in vaccination in the country, in the world. So people feel safe for that extra reason. So all these people are aggregating around the country that's fairly small. So we can only hope like good things come out of that.
And you mentioned the post pandemic world, right? And I think it's a good message that Portugal is giving to the world. How fast, with the right infrastructure and the right reaction to the pandemic, you can go back to normal, and bringing 40,000 people, at the Web Summit in a week is a good sign of that, don't you think?
Yeah, it was amazing, and I was commenting to a friend also a couple of days ago that it was the show not just of the organization, which was terrific, like getting 40,000 people here in person, but of the country itself, because it wouldn't be possible for the Web Summit to organize such an event of this scale if the country itself had not prepared, again, going back to the vaccinations and have all the logistics ready for all these people. And so, again, it was a show of force from Portugal that we're here, that we're open for business. And again, it just strengthens what I was, or reemphasizes what I was saying earlier, that people see in Portugal more and more a place where they can live safely.
It's interesting what you said. Actually, it's a pretty reasonable thing to say, but I never thought of the parallelism of people, willing to live together in a cool place as the requisite number zero for something like a Silicon Valley to be duplicated. And I'm actually connecting these dots with something that Antonio just said earlier, which is, hey, before 80% of the startups were from Porto and Lisbon. Right now, we have 160, I think he said, incubators in Portugal, of startups. And, there are a lot of smaller sort of urbanizations that are becoming, startup hubs, and how this is connected with, for example, the good and continuously improving education, sort of the education level of the country itself.
A lot. I mean, because again, you have these new people coming to the country, whether it's Portuguese from the diaspora that are coming back, like myself and many other visible faces in the ecosystem these days, or international people who want to come back to come to Lisbon and make it their home. We all bring these extra layers of knowledge and expertise from having done it in different markets. And that helps, again, build up capacity in the country. So there will be more opportunity for knowledge transfer, and people will. I mean, peers learn from peers, founders learn from founders more than from investors or accelerators, to be honest. So having more of these high quality founders setting up shop in Portugal is critical for the continued growth of the ecosystem.
Let's put a little bit of emphasis of the main vertical of this show. How hot is FinTech today in Portugal?
It's very hot. Obviously, it depends where you draw the boundary of defining what's FinTech and what's not FinTech. Because
great answer, my friend. Great answer.
Because these days, as an investor, we can see almost 80% of things will pitch it to be a FinTech, even if they're a supply chain solution, SaaS solution for the restaurant industry. Because
and when you doubt it, they just say, "Man, embedded finance," right?
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. Because everyone embeds finance there, and that's it. But it's the landscape in Portugal for FinTech is very good. Again, not just crypto and blockchain protocols and whatnot. For one reason or another, again, maybe going back to all those reasons why people decide to live in Portugal, there's more of these founders that are building things in the blockchain space in blockchain protocols. Now you even have Portuguese funds being set up just to invest in blockchain, in crypto. So we're seeing a lot of interesting things happen. There's public and private initiatives to promote FinTech and to promote Portugal as a FinTech hub. And I think that's terrific. The country tends to profit a lot from that.
So, I was actually thinking that isn't that an opportunity here? I'm doing like a live business development brainstorming on the show here, but a little bit like Luxembourg. Here you get like the financial services ecosystem, the corporations, and the tech who are geographically very close, because you can probably visit all of them in a day in Lisbon, unlike San Francisco for sure. But also the network is much smaller. So don't you think that there is an opportunity here for a higher degree of collaboration and opportunities exploring, where you bring together, I'm just making this up, the mail, like the phone, local telecom company, and the bank, and a couple of startups for like now truly an embedded finance experience or a building of new services, but as a result of a natural extended collaboration. I mean, I wonder, it is actually a question, and also like maybe like a proposal, that maybe someone should work on it closely, because the opportunity of doing something like this seems to me higher here than in many other countries, which ecosystems are much bigger. Is my impression correct?
Yeah, it's totally correct. So I mean, and it's happening already. I mean, it's happened in the last few years already. That because we're a small country in a small market, it is fairly easy for startups to connect with the top telco or the top bank and try and do things with them, pilots, and then eventually think real. Always tell founders that are considering Portugal as their base, as describing it as the best lab they can have, so they can test the products very easily at a low cost and then be ready to scale to the world. Obviously, they have to do it carefully so that they don't over-engineer the solutions for a small market. But if they do it right, it's very easy. I mean, the CEO of the top bank is just a call or two away from a top investor or a top accelerator in a company that's connected to them. We'll get to this telco or this bank very easily. Is there room for more collaboration? Sure. I mean, there's always more to happening. But if you look at, there's stuff happening in FinTech with SIBS, SIBS, and in their accelerator. There's things happening inside the healthcare system with ZMelo and their growth group. There's things happening with Brisa on mobility. So there's already a lot of collaboration between startups in the industry, but obviously there's always room for improvement. And I think the investors that are smart about it, now here to bring it back to Schilling for a second, will take advantage of that and will be able to help their companies very easily pilot their things in a top corporate in the country and then help them scale that solution globally faster. So
maybe one last sort of point of attention, because I don't want to give the perception to our auditors that we are just blindly vouching for this country and like the new paradise. I think also that there are some challenges. Okay, and one of the challenges I would love you to comment is the fact that the risk of having a country at least two speeds, right? So because when you plug a vibrant ecosystem with expats and foreign entrepreneurs and foreign capital plugged into a very part of Portugal is very traditional, and still the old generations are very far, right, from all this new techno world, and starting from the fact that everyone wants to stay in Lisbon to a point where very soon people from Lisbon, unless they own the house already, they won't afford to basically rent a place in Lisbon. So I identify this as one of the possible point of attention of this very fast-pacing transformation. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I saw it happening in San Francisco. And I've been talking about a lot of people in Portugal about that. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from cities that went exponential growth in number of people in what happened with housing crisis and social tension and whatnot. And I am kind of seeing a little bit of that already happening in Lisbon and Porto, so the top cities, where the prices are already going up very fast. And definitely there will be tension. And the government and the local governments will have to work on that. But I think I see it as part of progress. Maybe this is my talking with my capitalist hat, but I also have lots of social worries and concerns, and I started a nonprofit, so I have the two sides of the coin here. I think there's room to improve. I agree with you that this is not the perfect haven yet for everyone, especially the local communities will have to adjust, and they will need support to do that. And I think it's more like on the economic side and the financial side, because definitely the average income in Portugal is very low. And then you compare that to the average salary of these remote workers and in digital nomads in the country is very high. So that disparity is going to cause tension, no problem, no question. But that's economic and financial. Socially, I don't see any tension issues, which is something that we saw happening in San Francisco and in the Bay Area because of the homeless situation. I don't see that happening in Lisbon or Portugal, for that matter. Portuguese are actually very welcoming to other cultures, other religions. And you even if you go outside these main cities, in the countryside, there's a lot of these digital nomads and remote workers that are actually buying properties in the countryside. And these like small villages that were like dying because everyone left to go live in the big city now are being reactivated by these foreigners who are coming in and buying property and reviving it. So actually, it's a positive thing for these pockets, right? So it's good and bad. The country, the local governments will have to find solutions to make it work for everyone. Overall, I'm still very optimistic about the future.
Yeah, same here. Also, because everything is relative, right? So if you have a property here, like in the middle of the country, you're still like, it is very difficult to find a place that is more than 2 hours away to any big city here in Portugal. If you take like Porto, Lisbon, and Faro, you can't be like more than an hour and a half away and being like completely isolated from the rest of the world. So I think that exactly for this, that's why they call it the new Silicon Valley. But let's hope just that it will be just the new Silicon Valley in the best of terms, right?
I agree. Let's work on that.
Pedro, thank you very much for being with us. It was a super nice chat as always. And let's sort of commit live to do it in person very soon, my friend. Let's catch up next week at the beach.
Promise. I'll be in Israel visiting you soon. See you.
Thank you very much, Pedro. Thank you so much for being with us. Guys, that's episode 103. It's a wrap.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Europe, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with FinTech Stage. Don't forget to tweet us out, shout out, or post to the team at Breaking Banks EU on Twitter. If there's something or someone you'd like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next week on Breaking Banks Europe.